Hello everyone, welcome to Module 6 of the Himalayan webinar series, Maps and Navigation. As usual, this series is available every day, live at 8 o'clock in the morning. You can join through the URL given here. First 10 minutes of preview is posted on Instagram. Full videos of all the sessions are available on my blog, ultrajourneys.org. In this module, we'll be explaining about maps and navigation, an essential tool for the alpine style hiker, for the explorer, the person who finds his own way without using any of the local guides, basically. Here you can see us walking along lesser known routes high above the Sarab River in the Zanskar Valley after just crossing the Kutundala. We'll talk about various things here, like exploring the lesser known, the lesser used hiking routes, different types of maps, several map sources available, which will be useful to get a clear idea to study the terrain, the landscape, before you head out to an unexplored region, both satellites view-based as well as topographic maps. We'll talk a little about elevation data and profiles, elevation profiles, which are essential for your planning. How to plan your traverses, your path crossings, how to then navigate using either trekking trails, using a compass, using an altimeter, or simply mobile-based GPS navigation. There we go. So if we take a look at this picture, on the left side, we see a clearly defined hiking route used by during an annual yatra to Mani Mahesh. It's a clearly well laid out path, which is also maintained by the locals every year before the start of the pilgrim season, going towards high up, steep up to the Sukdali Pass. So the path here is extremely clear, it's well maintained, so you can actually, just like any pilgrim, you don't need any map or any way of navigation as the route is very clearly defined. There's no way to get lost here. Additionally, being a pilgrim route, there will be places to eat and stay along the way, so you don't need any gears at all, as you would be needing as an alpine style hiker. In contrast, if you look at the right side, here we see a shepherd climbing up with all his gears, followed by 500 sheep up to the Pir Panjal, the Kukti Pass, basically traversing from the Lahore side, shown here, to the Chamba side. You can see that the shepherd is simply climbing over some loose scree at the right side of the valley, and there's absolutely no trail here. So if you're all alone exploring this lesser used routes, you're going to need some tools, some maps, some understanding of the terrain, basically, in order not to get lost and successfully traverse a pass like, say, Kukti. There are a lot of different map sources available, which will be useful for you to analyze the terrain, to understand the landscape, assess the challenges that lay ahead of you, both satellite-based maps that will allow you to understand the types of terrain, the vegetation density, and then also terrain maps, topographic maps that basically allow you to assess the steepness of the terrain. The maps are available at different scales. Scales basically means what is the correlation between the scale on the map and the actual reality. The higher the scale, the more detailed the map will be, the more suitable it will be for hiking. One more interesting thing with these maps is that they don't only show you the, allow you to understand, study and understand the terrain. So it's much better equipped to explore an unused region, but they also contain, in many cases, many maps contain a lot of lesser used or unknown hiking routes. So carrying these maps along with you, either in paper format or offline mobile format, will give you a clear reference to navigate along. Let's take a quick look. Here we're looking at the Pir Panjal range. This pink line here, this is basically a continuous sequence of high ranges, 5 to 5,500 meter high. Several connected peaks, basically separating the Chamba Valley on the southern side here and the Chenab River Valley, Pangi and Lahore on the northern side. Along this Pir Panjal, you can see these U-shaped Saddles, these are basically passes. These are low points across this high range that will allow you to traverse from one side to the other sides. Here, for example, you're looking at the Kuhti Pass, and a couple of peaks later, we see the Chobia Pass. Here is how it looks visually. So the same shepherd again, looking, climbing up towards this Kuhti Pass, this U-shaped kind of the lowest point along the ridge, you can say, crossing over from Lahore to Chamba, seen in the same 3D Earth view on the right side. So satellite maps, you're looking at Google satellite maps. What's basically satellite maps from any source will give you a clear understanding of the landscape. You clearly see the streams here, the side streams. You can even see some snow depending on the season. You can see where is the forests. You can see open meadows, rock and ice, glaciers as you climb up further. That gives you a clear idea of which landscape to expect as you explore a certain region. Beauty about satellite maps is that you can, many of them are pretty high res, you can zoom in a lot. So if you look here, you can see this line, which is actually a 30 centimeter wide hiking trail, lesser used hiking trail in Zanskar, somewhere high above the Sarab River. So basically, if you zoom in deep enough on the satellite maps, you'll be able to discover a lot of undocumented trails, as well as settlements, campsites, shelters along your planned journey. The opposite side of the valley, you can also see one line here showing another trail on the opposite side of the Sarab River. So doing that, for example, here, if you look at my 2020 summer map, which unfortunately might not happen now in the lockdown, looking at a part of the Chamba Valley, north of the main Ravi River Valley. If you zoom in and you mark periodically these trails, you can clearly see entire routes appearing. In this case, routes along the higher ranges where the routes enter then eventually into the forest. You can also, if you zoom in, really detect homes, houses, shelters in very remote regions. You can mark these with a different symbol. These will be useful points where you can find night shelter, as well as, say, possible, if people are staying there, possible backup for food resupply. So again, all these reference points or waypoints can be downloaded in your phone and used then for on-the-field navigation. Going to contour maps. This looks like a satellite map, not a contour map. Oh, okay. So here, basically looking at a contour map, if we overlay over this specific mountain range contour lines, we can clearly see appearing the steepness of the terrain. So we can see which areas are like 300 meter high, and then in 20-meter increments, you can see 400 meter, 500 meter, 600, 700, and finally the inner contour, the highest points or the peaks of the landscape. It clearly shows closely spaced contours, which indicate steep slopes of the mountain. It shows lesser closely spaced contours, which will be more gradual gradients, more suitable for climbing up, for example, along this ridge here, which is clearly visible. You can also see valleys clearly on a contour map. So contours basically gives very useful information on the steepness, the overall elevation of the terrain, which will be essential when navigating in steep ranges like the Himalayas. Here we're looking at the same Pir Panjal range again, the same pink line, this time using a topographic or a contour map. You can clearly see the high ridge here, which connects the peaks, the various peaks along this Pir Panjal. You can see the inner circle here, these are all peaks. And then in between the peaks, you can see the U-shaped kind of saddles, which in some cases will correspond to passes used by shepherds to migrate from, say, the Chamba side here, climb up across this saddle and get down into a side stream leading to the Lahore side. So gives a very, very clear understanding of the overall elevation of the terrain, and it's very essential. Anyone hiking in the mountains should have contour maps with them as a reference to understand the landscape and know what lies ahead in an unknown area which you're exploring. Looking at it again and comparing, like on the left side again, that same Google Earth 3D view of this U-shaped saddle crossing the Kuchti Pass. On the right side, you can see the corresponding contour map, which once you get used to reading these contour lines, you will clearly correlate with the visual picture on the left side. Another contour view here, another topographic map of this time the Kaliheni Pass, connecting right side Kulu with left side Barabangal. If you look at this view and compared to the satellite view, you have a clear understanding here that again on the left side of the Kaliheni Pass, the contour lines are much wider space, so the terrain will be much more gradual. Eventually we join the stream here and trek along the valley. On the right side, if you look at the trail, it's steeply descends. The contours are very close here. You're dropping altitude significantly till you hit a small gully here, and here the trail follows contours horizontal along above the main valley. If you translate this view in an elevation profile of the same Kaliheni Pass, you can see this clearly. On the left side, you have the altitude. On the right side, you have the distance or the time, doesn't matter. So on the right side of the Kaliheni Pass, again, a steep drop to a certain level where the trail contours above the valley along the contour lines pretty gradually before finally it drops down into the Kulu Valley. And on the right side, you see a more gradual descent, and the trail here basically follows the stream, which slowly gets into the valley. Another climb up to eventually get down towards Barabangal. Very useful maps are the OpenStreetMaps. They will be useful because these maps are available offline actually, so you can carry this along with you, and they are like giving you a very good reference, base reference. They clearly show where are the vegetation areas, the forests. You can see the light blue areas here, which are the glaciers. Here, this dotted line is the district boundary between Kangra on the left and Chamba on the right, and actually corresponds to the Dolador range. It shows you those triangles, the peaks, and just like Google Maps, also in the inhabited areas, you will see villages and trails, farmlands, etc. If you overlay these same OpenStreetMaps with contours, oh, that will be in the next slide. So let me first zoom in a little bit closer on the same map. So if you zoom in a little more at a certain level, you will see trails appearing on the OpenStreetMaps. OSM has a lot of trails a little bit more in the touristic side, so say like Dharmasala here, or say Leh Ladakh, or say some more touristic trails in the Sahyadris. So it clearly marks a lot of passes in the mountains, and then clearly shows the trail that you can follow, as well as possible campsites, and in this case, caves along the way where you can take night shelter if required. If you overlay the same maps with contour lines, then again, you get actually like the perfect maps here. You have your contours, plus in addition to the Google terrain maps, which have only contours, you have all the OSM terrain details. So you can clearly see a glacier here hanging on the left side of the Kaliheni Pass. You can see glacial lakes. OSM clearly shows you the streams, the side streams, which you might have to cross. And again, in addition to all that, it actually has a trail for the Kaliheni Pass. So having this map offline in your mobile will give you a clear reference to navigate. Again, OSM, it's meant for hikers also, will have like shepherd shelters and suitable campsites with flat space and water sources marked. If you go down to certain paper maps, we have, especially for the Ladakh-Zanskar area, we have the famous Olizane maps used by mostly Europeans hiking in Ladakh. So these maps are again very nice. They're pretty high scale, 150,000 meters. So 1 centimeter corresponds to 1.5 kilometer on the map, in the field. Has lots of passes documented in the Ladakh area, like Dagaljot, Urgusla here, and then dotted trails, which basically show you the hiking routes through these various ranges. These maps are available in mostly in paper format, also available in digital copy, but unfortunately, they are not georeferenced, so you cannot really download them on the phone and identify your exact location on the map. But they are definitely useful reference to navigate along, say, with an altimeter or a compass to know roughly where your location is on this map and where to head out towards the passes. The most detailed maps, the most highest scale maps are these of the Survey of India, called the Open Series map, OSM series, available both for download for the non-sensitive, the non-border areas, and available in large paper format in the respective survey offices in different states. So here you can see again, it's a topographic map, has contour lines, has a lot of other useful information which you will not find on plain maps like Google Terrain Maps. Has lots of hiking trails, and not necessarily hiking trails, but migratory routes of nomadic villages or shepherd routes are used by villagers. You clearly see the streams, the size of the current of the stream, so you can assess whether you can cross it. And very important, as you can see, latitudes and longitudes are given. So the maps can be geo-referenced. You can basically uniquely identify your exact location on this map, either in paper format with a scale, with a ruler, or pinpoint your exact GPS location once you download and geo-reference this map in your mobile. A little information about elevation data. So the contours which we see is basically generated from what we call digital elevation data. NASA originally in the year 2000, originally generated elevation data for almost the entire planet, excluding the North and the South Pole. This was called the shuttle radio transmission mission. This data was made available to the general public, had a precision of 3 arc seconds corresponding to 90 meters. So not very accurate, but more than enough detail to get an overall idea about the elevation of the landscape. And from this data, basically, you can generate contour lines. You can download this elevation data also from, not only from the NASA, but in recent times also the Indian ISRO has built high resolution elevation data of the planet, which can be downloaded by the public. This is useful because some maps, like even some of the maps you download from the Survey of India, don't have contour lines on them. This is probably for security reasons, for maps closer to the border. So overlaying, downloading elevation data, generating contours, and overlaying these contours over these maps will again gives you a rich reference to carry along with you. In addition to a lot of trails which you'll find on the maps we discussed earlier, you also have what we call these trail databases, like, for example, Wikilog, where you can go to a certain area and it will show you a lot of trails. This again, more in the, more used hiking areas, say the more touristic places, you can say, where you can everyone can basically upload their trails and then share it among the hiking community. So anyone can download trails from a certain area, put it in your phone, and again, you have a clear reference for navigation and exploring a new area to you. So finally, route consolidation. So after you identify trails on sat maps, on OSM, on say extract some trails from trail databases, you can overlay all these reference trails, all these points here, villages, trail markings in your own Google map, and to get an overall idea of your overall planned traverse. Here you're looking at my 2020 map, sections of the Dolador and the Pir Panjal. So the same reference trails and waypoints can then be downloaded in OSM on the phone and will give you a clear understanding how to basically approach a certain pass across glaciers, moraines, where the trail will definitely not be obvious. Planning passes, here also, you need to clearly understand basically what you're getting into, to do these traverses. Here I have some 20 initial passes listed from my 2018 Trans-Himalayan mission. For every pass, we obviously need to understand the altitude. We have the starting village, the ending village, which will be important for food planning. The total elevation gain and drop, so the total climb and descent from the last village to the pass and back. And then basically, very important, what is the estimated time, the estimated duration to cross this pass, looking at the elevation gain, looking at the terrain, looking at the distance between the from and the to village. This number of days, again, is important to plan your food ration and, again, plan possible night stops along the way. We'll get focus more on route planning and planning these traverses in a separate upcoming chapter. A few words about navigation finally. So to navigate even, you can look at the fields, look at footsteps, look at droplings from, like, say, horses and yaks used by hiking expeditions to carry the luggage. Passes typically are clearly marked with these piles of stones and Tibetan prayer flags when you look at Buddhist areas like Ladakh, Zanskar, Lahore. And also in many routes, at least used routes, you will find these cairns. Cairns are basically stones stacked on top of each other at periodic distances, which allow you to stay on track, especially in lesser obvious areas like vast meadows or zones of screes and moraines, rocks where the trail might not be very clear. Another useful combination is having a reference map with a compass. Compass clearly shows you the direction in which you're walking, or the direction of the valley in which you're walking. So having a map here, like the, again, as I mentioned, the Olizane map is very popular with European hikers. So seeing the turns of the valley, seeing the side valleys joining the main valley, and knowing your direction basically will help you to pretty accurately identify your position as you follow a valley or as you follow a ridge or a side stream to head towards a pass. Another useful combination is a contour map with an altimeter. So the nice thing here is, unlike GPS watches or GPSs, which consume a lot of battery, an altimeter using a barometric altimeter in a watch uses much less battery and can survive for many weeks and months. So if you again walk along a ridge or a valley over a certain terrain and you look at your altimeter, you know the exact or rough altitude, then you can actually identify your exact position or rough position here along the trail, along the route, along the valley, along the ridge on the contour map. So you can actually assess how far you are on your way to the pass or how close you are to a certain suitable campsite towards the end of the day. Talk about GPS-based mobile navigation. As I mentioned, the OSM, the OpenStreetMaps, are available for offline download here. You can download them state-wise, say Himachal, Jammu, and say maybe Uttarakhand to cover the Western Himalayas. So you don't need a mobile network. You don't need to be connected to the network to have these very useful reference maps containing a lot of useful terrain details like glaciers, forests, open rock areas, as well as trails in the palm of your hand. One very useful application, OSM is a public mapping system. There are several applications, several views available. One very nice application which I've been using extensively is OSM AMD, OpenStreetMaps for Android, available these days both on Android and iPhone, which allows you a very fast, very speedy app, which allows you to look at this data at various zoom levels. Another nice thing, as I mentioned, is you can download also the contours for a certain state and overlay these on top of your OpenStreetMaps. And so the OpenStreetMap shows you, for example, the glaciers, the rock areas, and then overlaid with contours clearly shows you, for example, on the left of the Indrahar Pass, you have a steep climb. On the right side, you have a more gradual descent. You can zoom in to clearly see the trails. You can zoom out to get an overall idea of the landscape. On top of the base OSM layers, the contour lines on top of that, you can then put your own reference points, which you have extracted from different satellite maps, trails, hamlets, which you identified on the satellite maps, trails which you exported from trail databases or other types of maps. You can all overlay this on top of the OSM maps in OSM A and D. You can even kind of do routing just like you route from your home to the bus stand or the airport in the city. You can route along trails and get a clear idea of the exact distance and the elevation profile again, which will be important to plan your traverse across these passes. And then also a nice feature in OSM is the fact that you can put intermediate markers along your multi-day traverse or pass crossing, so say towards water points or shelters, so that you can actually clearly plan how much time, how much duration it is to your next reference point along your multi-day traverse. Voila, that's it, maps and navigation. I hope this gives you a little bit of insight. What are the available tools, available maps, available ways to navigate your way along the lesser known routes. As long as you walk on a clearly defined trail or path, again, if looking at the Mani Mahesh hiking trail, you'll be fine. But as you start exploring the lesser known routes, you'll definitely need to understand the terrain, understand the topography, the steepness, the types of terrains that lay ahead of you to plan your gears and find your way into new unknown regions. Thanks for attending this session. Any doubts, please drop below in the Instagram post for this module. See you guys tomorrow for the next session on, let me see, on minimalism and fast hiking. This is an important chapter which is going to show you how to hike, how to optimize your gears and hike much more enjoyable rather than dying below a 25 kilogram backpack as you hike steeply uphill in the Himalayas. See you guys tomorrow.